Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows that a Louisiana real estate licensee is preparing marketing materials for a property. They have taken photographs and videos of the property and are considering using editing software. Which of the following approaches best adheres to Louisiana's real estate license law and ethical standards regarding property representation? Option A. Use editing software to subtly enhance the lighting and color balance to make the property appear more inviting, and add a disclaimer stating that all enhancements are for illustrative purposes only. Option B. Virtually stage an empty living room with furniture and decor, presenting the images without any indication that the furniture is not physically present. Option C. Digitally remove a visible crack in the driveway and a patch of discolored paint on an exterior wall to present a more pristine image of the property. Option D. Slightly widen the apparent size of a small bedroom in the photographs to give the impression of more spaciousness. Correct answer is A. Use editing software to subtly enhance the lighting and color balance to make the property appear more inviting, and add a disclaimer stating that all enhancements are for illustrative purposes only. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that real estate professionals in Louisiana must navigate a complex landscape when using photography and videography for marketing. The challenge lies in balancing effective marketing with strict adherence to Louisiana's real estate license law and ethical standards, particularly concerning misrepresentation and disclosure. Failing to accurately represent a property or omitting material facts can lead to significant legal and disciplinary consequences. The best approach involves ensuring all visual marketing materials are truthful, accurate, and do not mislead potential buyers. This means capturing the property as it exists, without digitally altering features to make it appear larger, more appealing, or to hide defects. If enhancements are made, such as virtual staging or adding landscaping, clear and conspicuous disclosures must accompany the visuals, informing viewers that these are representations and not the actual condition of the property. This aligns with Louisiana's requirement for honesty and fair dealing, preventing deceptive practices. An approach that digitally removes visible defects, such as a cracked foundation or water stains, is ethically and regulatorily unacceptable. This constitutes misrepresentation, as it presents a false impression of the property's condition, violating the duty of honesty owed to prospective buyers. Another unacceptable approach is to digitally enhance the size of rooms or the clarity of views to make the property appear more desirable than it is in reality. This is a form of deception that misleads buyers about the property's true characteristics and can lead to disappointment and legal disputes. Furthermore, an approach that fails to disclose the use of virtual staging or other digital enhancements, presenting them as actual features of the property, is also problematic. While virtual staging itself is not inherently illegal, failing to disclose it is deceptive and violates the principle of providing accurate information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes truthfulness and transparency. This involves a pre-production checklist to identify potential ethical pitfalls, a thorough review of all visual content for accuracy before publication, and a commitment to providing clear disclosures for any digital alterations or enhancements. When in doubt about whether a visual representation is truthful, it is always best to err on the side of caution and provide additional context or omit the potentially misleading element. Question. The evaluation methodology shows that a Louisiana real estate licensee is preparing marketing materials for a property. They have taken photographs and videos of the property and are considering using editing software. Which of the following approaches best adheres to Louisiana's real estate license law and ethical standards regarding property representation? Options. A. Use editing software to subtly enhance the lighting and color balance to make the property appear more inviting, and add a disclaimer stating that all enhancements are for illustrative purposes only. B. Digitally remove a visible crack in the driveway and a patch of discolored paint on an exterior wall to present a more pristine image of the property. C. Virtually stage an empty living room with furniture and decor, presenting the images without any indication that the furniture is not physically present. D. Slightly widen the apparent size of a small bedroom in the photographs to give the impression of more spaciousness. Question 2. Governance review demonstrates that a Louisiana real estate salesperson has presented a written purchase agreement to their client. The agreement is signed by both the buyer and the seller, clearly identifies the property and the agreed-upon purchase price, and outlines the closing date. However, the agreement conspicuously omits any mention of an earnest money deposit. What is the most appropriate course of action for the salesperson to advise their client regarding the enforceability of this agreement under Louisiana law? Option A. Proceed with the transaction as if the contract is fully enforceable, assuming the earnest money deposit is an implied term that can be addressed at a later stage. Option B. Suggest to the client that the earnest money deposit is a minor detail, and its absence does not significantly impact the contract's validity or enforceability. Option C. Inform the client that the written and signed agreement is automatically binding and enforceable, regardless of the missing earnest money deposit, as it fulfills the basic requirements of a contract. Option D. Advise the client that the agreement, as written, is likely unenforceable as a binding sales contract due to the absence of a material term, earnest money deposit, and recommend seeking legal counsel to clarify or amend the agreement. Correct answer is D. Advise the client that the agreement, as written, is likely unenforceable as a binding sales contract due to the absence of a material term, earnest money deposit, and recommend seeking legal counsel to clarify or amend the agreement. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Louisiana to navigate the enforceability of a contract when a critical element, the earnest money deposit, is missing. The salesperson must understand the legal requirements for a valid contract under Louisiana law and how the absence of a specific term can impact its enforceability, potentially leading to disputes and financial repercussions for their client. Careful judgment is required to advise the client appropriately and avoid misrepresenting the legal standing of the agreement. The best professional approach involves advising the client that the agreement, as presented without the earnest money deposit, is likely unenforceable as a binding sales contract under Louisiana law. This is because the earnest money deposit is typically considered a material term, essential for demonstrating the buyer's serious intent and providing consideration. Without it, the agreement may be viewed as a mere offer or an agreement to agree, lacking the mutual assent and consideration necessary for a valid contract under the Louisiana Civil Code. A licensed salesperson has a duty to understand and communicate these fundamental contract principles to their clients, ensuring they are not operating under a false sense of security regarding the agreement's legal standing. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the assumption that the contract is enforceable despite the missing earnest money deposit, perhaps by advising the client to simply move forward as if the deposit were implicitly understood. This fails to acknowledge the legal requirement for clear and definite terms in a contract. Louisiana law, particularly concerning the formation of contracts, emphasizes the need for a cause, or consideration and mutual consent on the principal obligations. The absence of a specified earnest money deposit, which serves as a form of security and consideration for the seller, undermines these requirements. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest that the earnest money deposit is a minor detail that can be addressed later, or that its absence does not affect the contract's validity. This demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of contract law. In Louisiana, while parties can agree to terms, the absence of a crucial element like earnest money, especially when it's a customary and expected part of a real estate transaction, can render the agreement voidable or unenforceable. The salesperson's role is to ensure all essential elements are present and understood, not to overlook potential deficiencies. A further incorrect approach would be to advise the client that the contract is automatically binding and enforceable because it is in writing and signed by both parties. While a written agreement is important, it must still contain all the essential elements of a contract. The presence of signatures does not cure a fundamental defect in the agreement's substance, such as the lack of a material term like the earnest money deposit, which is crucial for establishing the buyer's commitment and the seller's assurance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough review of the agreement against the fundamental requirements of contract law in Louisiana. This includes identifying all essential terms, such as the parties, the property, the price, and any conditions precedent or subsequent, including customary elements like earnest money. If a material term is missing or ambiguous, the salesperson must advise their client of the potential legal implications and recommend seeking legal counsel to clarify or amend the agreement before proceeding. The salesperson's duty is to facilitate a legally sound transaction, not to gloss over potential contractual weaknesses. Question 3. The performance metrics show a consistent trend of increasing interest rates impacting the affordability of homes in Louisiana. A prospective buyer expresses concern about securing a mortgage and asks for your guidance on how to best navigate the current financing landscape. Which of the following represents the most professional and legally compliant course of action for a Louisiana licensed real estate salesperson? Option A. Advise the buyer not to worry about the rising interest rates, stating that financing will likely become more manageable as the market adjusts. Option B. Offer to help the buyer negotiate specific interest rates and loan terms with potential lenders, as you have experience in this area. Option C. Educate the buyer on the general types of mortgage financing available, the importance of obtaining a mortgage pre-approval from a reputable lender, and encourage them to consult with multiple lenders to compare terms and rates. Option D. Recommend a specific mortgage lender that you have a good working relationship with, assuring the buyer they will receive favorable terms. The correct answer is C. Educate the buyer on the general types of mortgage financing available, the importance of obtaining a mortgage pre-approval from a reputable lender, and encourage them to consult with multiple lenders to compare terms and rates. Explanation. The performance metrics show a consistent trend of increasing interest rates impacting the affordability of homes in Louisiana. This scenario is professionally challenging because a real estate salesperson must navigate the complexities of financing options for buyers in a rising interest rate environment, while adhering to Louisiana's real estate license law and ethical standards. Misinformation or inappropriate advice can lead to significant financial harm for clients and regulatory repercussions for the licensee. The best approach involves educating the buyer on various financing options and their implications in the current market, emphasizing the importance of pre-approval and consulting with qualified lenders. This approach is correct because Louisiana's real estate license law mandates that licensees act with honesty, integrity, and competence. Providing comprehensive, unbiased information about financing options, without offering specific financial advice, empowers the buyer to make informed decisions. It aligns with the ethical duty to represent the client's best interests by ensuring they understand the financial landscape and the role of lenders in securing a mortgage. This also respects the boundaries of the salesperson's license, which does not permit the practice of mortgage brokering or financial advising. An incorrect approach involves recommending a specific lender or mortgage product based on personal relationships or perceived benefits to the salesperson. This is ethically problematic as it creates a potential conflict of interest and may not be in the buyer's best financial interest. Louisiana's real estate license law prohibits licensees from engaging in deceptive practices or misrepresenting services. Another incorrect approach is to downplay the impact of rising interest rates and assure the buyer that financing will not be an issue. This demonstrates a lack of competence and honesty, violating the duty to provide accurate information. It can lead to a buyer pursuing a purchase they cannot afford, resulting in financial distress and potential legal issues. Finally, an incorrect approach is to provide specific advice on mortgage terms or interest rate negotiation. This constitutes practicing mortgage brokering or financial advising without the proper licenses and expertise, which is a direct violation of Louisiana law and beyond the scope of a real estate salesperson's authority. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes client education and informed consent. This involves understanding the client's financial situation, clearly explaining the role of a real estate salesperson versus a mortgage lender, and facilitating access to qualified professionals for financial advice. The focus should always be on empowering the client with knowledge and resources to make sound financial decisions, while strictly adhering to the boundaries of their license and ethical obligations. Question 4. Analysis of a residential property in New Orleans, Louisiana, is being conducted by a real estate salesperson for a potential investor client. The client is eager to generate immediate rental income. Which of the following analytical approaches best serves the client's interests and complies with Louisiana Real Estate Commission regulations? Option A. Focusing exclusively on the highest projected monthly rental income figure provided by the seller, without further investigation into operating costs or market conditions. Option B. Presenting a detailed analysis that includes projected rental income, estimated operating expenses, potential capital expenditures, market appreciation forecasts, and a discussion of comparable property sales to provide a holistic view of the investment's potential. Option C, relying solely on the seller's stated net operating income without conducting an independent assessment of expenses or potential future costs. Option D, emphasizing the speed at which the property can be listed and sold to generate immediate cash for the client, downplaying the long-term investment viability. The correct answer is B, presenting a detailed analysis that includes projected rental income, estimated operating expenses, potential capital expenditures, market appreciation forecasts, and a discussion of comparable property sales to provide a holistic view of the investment's potential. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Louisiana to balance the client's desire for a quick sale with the fiduciary duty to present all relevant information for informed decision-making. The salesperson must avoid steering the client towards a decision that might not be in their best long-term interest, even if it appears beneficial in the short term. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Louisiana Real Estate Commission (LREC) regulations regarding disclosure and fair dealing. The best approach involves a comprehensive analysis that considers multiple investment metrics beyond just the immediate cash flow. This includes evaluating the property's potential for appreciation, its condition, market trends, and comparable sales. By presenting a range of analytical tools and explaining their implications, the salesperson empowers the client to make a well-informed decision. This aligns with LREC emphasis on honesty, integrity, and the duty to disclose all material facts, ensuring the client understands the full picture of the investment's potential risks and rewards. An approach that focuses solely on the projected rental income and ignores potential capital expenditures or market depreciation is professionally unacceptable. This failure to consider the full scope of investment analysis can lead to a misrepresentation of the property's true value and future performance, violating the duty of care owed to the client. Another unacceptable approach is to solely rely on the seller's provided financial projections without independent verification or further analysis. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and could result in the client making a decision based on incomplete or inaccurate information, which is contrary to LREC standards of professional conduct. Finally, an approach that prioritizes securing a quick sale over providing thorough investment analysis is unethical and potentially illegal. The salesperson's primary obligation is to the client's best interests, which includes providing accurate and complete information to facilitate a sound investment decision, not merely expediting a transaction. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's goals and risk tolerance. This is followed by gathering all relevant property information, conducting a thorough and multifaceted investment analysis, and then clearly communicating the findings and their implications to the client. The salesperson should act as a trusted advisor, providing objective insights rather than pushing for a specific outcome. Question 5. The review process indicates that a licensed real estate salesperson in Louisiana, while representing a seller in a residential property transaction, learns that a close personal friend is interested in purchasing that same property. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for the salesperson to take? Option A. Inform the buyer of the relationship with the seller and advise them to seek independent representation to avoid any perceived conflict. Option B. Inform the prospective buyer of the seller's property details and encourage them to make an offer without mentioning the seller's identity or the salesperson's representation. Option C. Immediately disclose the relationship with the prospective buyer to the seller and discuss how this potential conflict of interest will be managed. Option D. Proceed with the transaction, assuming the salesperson can remain objective and only inform the seller if the friend makes a formal offer. Correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the relationship with the prospective buyer to the seller and discuss how this potential conflict of interest will be managed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Louisiana to navigate the delicate balance between client interests and regulatory obligations when faced with a potential conflict of interest. The salesperson must act with integrity and transparency, adhering to Louisiana's real estate license law and commission regulations to avoid misrepresentation or undisclosed conflicts. Careful judgment is required to ensure all parties are treated fairly, and that the salesperson's actions do not violate their fiduciary duties or ethical standards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to both the seller and the prospective buyer. This approach is correct because Louisiana's real estate license law, specifically concerning disclosure requirements and fiduciary duties, mandates that licensees must inform all parties of any material facts, including potential conflicts of interest, that could affect their decision-making. By disclosing the relationship with the buyer, the salesperson upholds their duty of loyalty and honesty to the seller, allowing the seller to make an informed decision about proceeding with the transaction or seeking alternative representation. This transparency prevents any appearance of impropriety and ensures compliance with ethical standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the transaction without informing the seller about the relationship with the buyer. This is a direct violation of Louisiana's real estate license law, which prohibits misrepresentation and requires full disclosure of material facts. It breaches the fiduciary duty owed to the seller, creating an undisclosed conflict of interest that compromises the salesperson's loyalty and integrity. Another incorrect approach is to inform only the buyer about the relationship with the seller. While this might seem like a partial disclosure, it fails to address the primary obligation to the seller. The seller has the right to know about any circumstances that could influence the salesperson's advice or actions, especially when that advice might be swayed by a pre-existing relationship with the other party in the transaction. This selective disclosure is insufficient and still constitutes a breach of duty. A further incorrect approach is to withdraw from representing the seller without any explanation. While withdrawing might seem like a way to avoid the conflict, doing so without a clear and transparent reason, especially after having already engaged in discussions and potentially received confidential information from the seller, can be seen as unprofessional and potentially harmful to the seller's interests if it leaves them in a difficult position without adequate time to secure new representation. The proper procedure involves a clear disclosure and discussion of options, not an abrupt departure. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, honesty, and adherence to regulatory requirements. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the immediate step should be to identify the nature of the conflict and its potential impact on all parties involved. The next step is to consult the relevant state regulations. In this case, Louisiana's real estate license law and commission regulations, to understand the specific disclosure obligations. The professional should then communicate openly and honestly with all affected parties, explaining the situation and the potential implications. This proactive and transparent approach not only ensures legal and ethical compliance, but also builds trust and maintains professional integrity. Question 6. Performance analysis shows that a licensed real estate salesperson in Louisiana is meeting with a new client who is interested in purchasing a property. The client has expressed a desire to understand not just the physical characteristics of potential properties, but also the broader implications of owning real estate in the state. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates the salesperson's understanding of the definition and importance of real estate in Louisiana? Option A. Describing real estate solely as a commodity to be bought and sold for maximum profit, emphasizing quick turnover strategies. Option B. Explaining that real estate includes the land, any permanent structures, and the associated legal rights of ownership, and discussing how these elements contribute to the client's potential investment, personal use, and community impact. Option C. Focusing primarily on the square footage, number of bedrooms, and current market price of properties, as these are the most critical factors for a buyer. Option D. Defining real estate strictly by its assessed value for property tax purposes, as this is the most direct measure of its financial significance. The correct answer is B. Explaining that real estate includes the land, any permanent structures, and the associated legal rights of ownership, and discussing how these elements contribute to the client's potential investment, personal use, and community impact. Explanation. Performance analysis shows that real estate professionals in Louisiana must possess a nuanced understanding of the definition and importance of real estate beyond mere transactional aspects. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires distinguishing between the legal definition of real property and its broader economic and social significance, and then applying this understanding to client interactions and professional responsibilities. A failure to grasp this distinction can lead to misrepresentation, inadequate client advice, and potential legal or ethical breaches under Louisiana law. The best professional practice involves recognizing that the definition of real estate encompasses not only the land and its permanent attachments, but also the bundle of rights associated with ownership. Its importance lies in its role as a fundamental asset for individuals and businesses, influencing economic stability, community development, and personal wealth. A licensee demonstrating this understanding will be able to effectively advise clients on the full scope of their property interests, including potential encumbrances, easements, and mineral rights, which are particularly relevant in Louisiana. This approach aligns with the Louisiana Real Estate License Law's emphasis on competence and ethical conduct, requiring licensees to act in the best interest of their clients and to possess sufficient knowledge to perform their duties. An approach that focuses solely on the physical aspects of a property, such as its size and condition, is insufficient. This overlooks the legal and economic dimensions that are integral to the definition and importance of real estate. Such a narrow view can lead to incomplete client consultations and a failure to identify potential issues that could impact a transaction's success or a client's long-term interests, potentially violating the duty of care owed to clients. Another inadequate approach is to treat real estate merely as a commodity for quick profit, without considering its implications for the community or the long-term value for the owner. This perspective neglects the broader societal importance of real estate and can lead to practices that prioritize short-term gains over sustainable development or client well-being, which is contrary to the ethical principles guiding licensed professionals. Finally, an approach that views the definition of real estate only through the lens of its market value for listing purposes fails to acknowledge the intrinsic legal and rights-based components. While market value is crucial for transactions, it is not the entirety of what constitutes real estate or its importance. This limited perspective can result in a failure to identify or explain critical aspects of property ownership that are vital for informed decision-making. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the legal definition of real estate as prescribed by Louisiana statutes and common law. This understanding should then be integrated with an appreciation of its economic, social, and personal significance. When interacting with clients, licensees must actively seek to understand their clients' objectives and concerns, and then apply their comprehensive knowledge of real estate to provide accurate, ethical, and beneficial advice. Continuous education and a commitment to ethical practice are paramount to navigating the complexities of the real estate profession in Louisiana. Question 7. The monitoring system demonstrates that a married couple in Louisiana is purchasing a vacation home together. They have expressed a desire for the property to automatically pass to the surviving spouse upon the death of one of them, without the need for probate. They also mention that they want to ensure each spouse has an equal, undivided interest in the property during their lifetimes. Based on this information, what is the most appropriate advice for a Louisiana real estate salesperson to provide regarding the ownership structure? Option A. Advise the couple that they can achieve their goals by taking title as joint tenants with the right of survivorship, and recommend they consult with a Louisiana attorney to ensure the deed is properly drafted to reflect this intent. Option B. Advise the couple that the most straightforward ownership structure is tenancy in common, as it ensures each party has an undivided interest and simplifies future sales. Option C. Advise the couple that their desire for automatic inheritance is best handled through separate wills, and that joint ownership is not necessary for this purpose. Option D. Advise the couple that simply titling the property in both their names will automatically create a joint tenancy with the right of survivorship, as this is the standard for married couples in Louisiana. Correct answer is A. Advise the couple that they can achieve their goals by taking title as joint tenants with the right of survivorship, and recommend they consult with a Louisiana attorney to ensure the deed is properly drafted to reflect this intent. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a common challenge in real estate transactions involving multiple parties and differing intentions regarding property ownership. The professional challenge lies in accurately identifying and advising clients on the most appropriate form of ownership that aligns with their stated goals and the legal framework of Louisiana, while also ensuring all parties understand the implications of their chosen structure. Misinterpreting or misadvising on ownership types can lead to significant legal disputes, unintended consequences for heirs, and potential financial liabilities. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of Louisiana's civil law tradition and its specific property law, particularly concerning forms of co-ownership. This approach prioritizes clear communication and accurate legal advice tailored to the client's expressed desires. It requires the licensee to explain the nuances of each ownership type, such as the right of survivorship in joint tenancy with the right of survivorship, JT Rose, versus the undivided interests and potential for partition in tenancy in common TIC, and how these align with the client's wishes for inheritance and control. Advising the clients to consult with an attorney for final legal documentation ensures compliance with Louisiana's stringent legal requirements for property transfers and ownership structures, thereby protecting both the clients and the licensee. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a simple joint account or a shared deed automatically equates to a specific form of co-ownership without verifying the client's intent and the legal mechanisms available in Louisiana. For instance, assuming that simply titling property in two names creates a joint tenancy with the right of survivorship without the explicit legal language required by Louisiana law is a critical error. This oversight fails to acknowledge that, by default in Louisiana, co-ownership is presumed to be tenancy in common unless otherwise specified and legally established. Another incorrect approach would be to advise the clients based on common law concepts of joint tenancy, without understanding how Louisiana's civil law system modifies or replaces these concepts, potentially leading to the creation of a TIC when JT Rose was intended, or vice versa. Failing to emphasize the distinct inheritance implications of each form of ownership, especially the automatic transfer to the surviving owner in JT Rose versus the distribution according to a will or intestate succession in TIC, represents a significant failure in professional duty. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with active listening to understand client objectives fully. This is followed by a comprehensive assessment of the available legal options within the specific jurisdiction, Louisiana. The professional must then clearly articulate the implications of each option, highlighting how they meet or fail to meet the client's stated goals. Crucially, given the complexity and legal finality of property ownership, recommending consultation with a qualified Louisiana attorney for the drafting and execution of legal documents is paramount to ensure compliance and protect all parties involved. Question 8. Investigation of a potential real estate investment opportunity in Louisiana for a client reveals a real estate investment trust rate that promises attractive dividend yields. As a licensed real estate salesperson in Louisiana, what is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action to advise your client regarding this rate? Option A. Suggest the client purchase shares in the rate directly through the rate website, as this is a straightforward way to access the investment. Option B. Conduct a thorough due diligence on the rate, assess its suitability for the client's financial goals and risk tolerance, and clearly explain that rate are securities with associated risks, advising the client to consult with a licensed securities professional if they wish to proceed, while also disclosing any potential conflicts of interest. Option C. Recommend the rate to the client immediately due to its high dividend yield, as this is a primary indicator of a good real estate investment. Option D. Advise the client to invest in the rate, emphasizing its potential for capital appreciation, without detailing the specific risks or the fact that it is a security. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough due diligence on the rate, assess its suitability for the client's financial goals and risk tolerance, and clearly explain that rate are securities with associated risks, advising the client to consult with a licensed securities professional if they wish to proceed, while also disclosing any potential conflicts of interest. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a real estate salesperson in Louisiana is tasked with advising a client on an investment that, while potentially lucrative, carries specific regulatory and disclosure requirements. The salesperson must navigate the complexities of real estate investment trusts, rate, and ensure their advice aligns with Louisiana's real estate licensing laws and general ethical obligations to clients, particularly concerning the suitability and disclosure of investment risks. The challenge lies in balancing the client's investment goals with the salesperson's duty to provide accurate, unbiased information and to operate within the bounds of their license. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves thoroughly researching the specific rate, understanding its structure, investment strategy, historical performance, and associated risks. Crucially, the salesperson must then determine if this investment is suitable for the client's stated financial goals, risk tolerance, and investment horizon. This includes clearly explaining to the client that rate are securities and may require separate registration or licensing beyond a real estate license, and that the salesperson's role is limited to real estate transactions unless they hold appropriate securities licenses. Full disclosure of any potential conflicts of interest and the inherent risks of rate investments is paramount. This approach is correct because it prioritizes the client's best interests, adheres to ethical standards of disclosure and suitability, and respects the jurisdictional boundaries of a real estate license in Louisiana. Louisiana real estate licensees are held to a standard of care that requires them to be competent and knowledgeable, and to act in the best interest of their clients. While rate are real estate related, their nature as investment securities necessitates careful consideration of licensing and disclosure requirements. Incorrect approaches analysis, recommending the rate solely based on its perceived high dividend yield without a comprehensive suitability analysis for the client's financial situation, is an ethical and regulatory failure. This approach neglects the salesperson's duty to ensure investments are appropriate for the client and could lead to a misrepresentation of the investment's overall risk profile. It also potentially violates Louisiana's regulations regarding acting in the client's best interest. Suggesting the client invest in the rate without disclosing that rate are considered securities and may require specific securities licensing or registration, and without a thorough explanation of the risks involved, is a significant regulatory and ethical breach. This failure to disclose material information about the nature of the investment and its associated risks can mislead the client and expose the salesperson to liability. Louisiana law requires licensees to disclose all material facts, focusing only on the potential for capital appreciation and downplaying, or omitting discussion of the inherent risks and volatility associated with rate, is also professionally unacceptable. This selective disclosure is misleading and fails to meet the standard of providing complete and accurate information required of a Louisiana real estate licensee. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Louisiana should adopt a client-centric decision-making process. This involves first understanding the client's needs and financial profile. Then, they must possess or acquire sufficient knowledge about any product or investment being discussed, including its regulatory classification and associated risks. Transparency and full disclosure are non-negotiable. If an investment falls outside the scope of their real estate license, they must clearly communicate this limitation to the client, and if appropriate, advise the client to seek counsel from a licensed securities professional. The ultimate goal is to ensure the client makes informed decisions that align with their best interests, while the professional operates ethically and within legal boundaries. Question 9. Comparative studies suggest that buyers often have a limited understanding of mortgage financing terms. In Louisiana, a real estate licensee is assisting a buyer who is obtaining a conventional loan with a down payment of 10%. The lender has indicated that private mortgage insurance, PMI, will be required. Which of the following actions by the licensee best fulfills their professional and ethical obligations to the buyer regarding PMI? Option A. Briefly mention that PMI is a requirement and that it's a small additional cost that won't significantly impact their monthly budget. Option B. Inform the buyer that PMI is a lender requirement and assume the lender has fully explained all details. Option C. Advise the buyer that PMI is a mandatory fee that cannot be avoided and is a permanent part of their mortgage payment. Option D. Proactively explain to the buyer the purpose of PMI, its typical cost as a monthly expense, and the conditions under which it can be canceled or terminated. The correct answer is D. Proactively explain to the buyer the purpose of PMI, its typical cost as a monthly expense, and the conditions under which it can be canceled or terminated. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a real estate licensee in Louisiana must navigate the complexities of private mortgage insurance, PMI, disclosure requirements, while ensuring the buyer fully understands the financial implications of their loan. The challenge lies in presenting this information clearly and accurately, avoiding any misrepresentation or omission that could lead to a buyer making an uninformed decision. The licensee's duty of care extends to ensuring the buyer comprehends the nature and cost of PMI, which is a significant financial component of their mortgage. The best approach involves proactively and clearly explaining the purpose and cost of PMI to the buyer. This includes detailing that PMI is required by lenders when a borrower's down payment is less than 20% of the home's purchase price, and that it protects the lender, not the borrower. Furthermore, the licensee should explain that PMI is an additional monthly expense that will be included in the mortgage payment, and that it can typically be canceled once the loan-to-value ratio reaches 80% or automatically terminates at 78%. This comprehensive disclosure, aligning with Louisiana's real estate licensing laws that mandate fair dealing and disclosure of material facts, empowers the buyer to make an informed decision about their financing. An incorrect approach would be to simply state that PMI is a requirement without elaborating on its function, cost, or cancellation provisions. This omission fails to provide the buyer with the necessary information to understand the full financial burden of their mortgage, potentially leading to buyer's remorse or financial strain. Another incorrect approach is to downplay the significance of PMI, suggesting it is a minor fee or that it will be easily absorbed into the monthly payment. This misrepresents the financial impact and violates the licensee's duty to be truthful and avoid misleading statements. Finally, assuming the lender has fully explained PMI and therefore absolving oneself of the responsibility to discuss it is also an unacceptable approach. While lenders do have disclosure obligations, the Louisiana real estate licensee has an independent duty to ensure their client understands all material aspects of the transaction, including financing costs. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes client education and transparency. This involves anticipating potential areas of confusion for buyers, such as mortgage insurance, and proactively addressing them. A thorough understanding of relevant disclosure laws, coupled with a commitment to clear and honest communication, forms the bedrock of ethical and competent real estate practice. When in doubt about the clarity of a disclosure, it is always best to err on the side of providing more information rather than less. Question 10. The investigation demonstrates that a real estate investor in Louisiana is considering purchasing a distressed property and has identified two potential financing options: a hard money loan and seller financing. The hard money loan offers $200,000 at 15% annual interest for 12 months, with a 2% origination fee and no points. Seller financing is available for $200,000 at 8% annual interest, amortized over 30 years, with a balloon payment due in 5 years, and requires a 10% down payment from the investor. The investor has $30,000 available for the down payment. Assuming the investor intends to sell the property within 5 years, which financing option presents a lower total cost of borrowing, and what is that cost? Option A. Seller financing has a lower total cost of borrowing, calculated as the down payment plus the total interest paid over 5 years, amounting to $30,000 plus $73,333. 33 equals $103,333. 33. Option B. Hard money loan has a lower total cost of borrowing, calculated as the loan amount plus the origination fee and total interest paid over 12 months, amounting to $200,000 plus $4,000 plus $28,000 equals $232,000. Option C. The hard money loan has a lower total cost of borrowing, calculated as the loan amount plus the origination fee and total interest paid over 12 months, amounting to $200,000 plus $4,000 plus $30,000 equals $234,000. Option D. Seller financing has a lower total cost of borrowing, calculated as the down payment plus the total interest paid over 5 years, amounting to $30,000 plus $80,000 equals $110,000. The correct answer is A. Seller financing has a lower total cost of borrowing, calculated as the down payment plus the total interest paid over 5 years, amounting to $30,000 plus $73,333. 33 equals $103, 333. 33. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a common challenge faced by real estate professionals in Louisiana when advising clients on property acquisition, particularly when traditional financing is unavailable. The core difficulty lies in accurately calculating the true cost of financing and ensuring the client fully understands the implications of different loan structures, especially those involving higher interest rates and fees common with hard money loans. A critical aspect is the salesperson's responsibility to provide clear, unbiased information about all available financing options, adhering to Louisiana Real Estate Commission (LREC) guidelines regarding disclosure and avoiding misrepresentation. The best approach involves a thorough and transparent calculation of the total cost of the hard money loan, including all fees and the interest paid over the loan term, and comparing this to the potential costs and benefits of seller financing. This requires the salesperson to act as a financial educator, not a lender, by presenting the numbers clearly and allowing the investor to make an informed decision. Specifically, calculating the total repayment amount for the hard money loan, including the principal, interest, and any origination or closing fees, and then comparing this to the projected costs under seller financing, which might involve different interest rates, down payments, and amortization schedules, provides a comprehensive financial picture. This aligns with LREC emphasis on honesty and fair dealing, ensuring clients are not misled by incomplete or misleading financial projections. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the initial monthly payment of the hard money loan, without disclosing the total cost over the loan's short term, or to downplay the impact of the higher interest rate and fees. This misrepresents the true financial burden and violates LREC mandate against deceptive practices. Another incorrect approach would be to present seller financing as inherently superior without a detailed numerical comparison, potentially steering the client towards a less advantageous option based on assumptions rather than data. Failing to clearly outline the terms and total cost of both options, or providing only a partial financial picture, constitutes a failure to uphold professional standards and LREC regulations. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the client's financial goals and risk tolerance. Then, they must gather all relevant financial details for each potential financing option. The next step is to perform objective, detailed calculations for each option, presenting the total cost of borrowing, including all fees and interest, over the expected holding period. This data-driven approach, coupled with clear communication and a commitment to full disclosure, empowers the client to make the most suitable decision, thereby fulfilling the salesperson's fiduciary and ethical obligations under Louisiana law. Question 11. In Louisiana, when assisting a prospective buyer who is exploring financing options, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant method for a real estate salesperson to address the potential use of FHA, VA, or USDA loans? Option A. Explain the general purpose and target audience of FHA, VA, and USDA loans. Advise the buyer to consult with a qualified mortgage lender for specific eligibility and application details. Option B. Assure the buyer that based on their stated income and credit score, they will likely qualify for an FHA loan and can proceed with making an offer. Option C. Inform the buyer that USDA loans are only available in rural areas, and that if their desired property is not in a designated rural zone, they should not consider this option. Option D. Advise the buyer that VA loans are generally the best option for all veterans and that they should focus their efforts on securing one. The correct answer is A. Explain the general purpose and target audience of FHA, VA, and USDA loans, and advise the buyer to consult with a qualified mortgage lender for specific eligibility and application details. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a real estate licensee must accurately advise clients on financing options without overstepping their expertise or misrepresenting the capabilities of government-backed loan programs. Misinformation can lead to significant financial detriment for the buyer and potential legal repercussions for the licensee. Careful judgment is required to differentiate between general real estate knowledge and specialized loan program details. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves accurately describing the general purpose and target audience of FHA, VA, and USDA loans, emphasizing that these are government-backed programs designed to assist specific buyer groups. The licensee should clearly state that detailed eligibility requirements, specific loan terms, and application processes are best discussed with a qualified mortgage lender or loan officer who specializes in these programs. This approach is correct because it aligns with Louisiana's real estate licensing laws, which require licensees to act with honesty and integrity and to avoid misrepresentation. It also respects the boundaries of their professional license by not providing advice outside their scope of expertise, thereby protecting the consumer and the licensee. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to provide definitive statements about a buyer's eligibility for a specific government-backed loan based on general knowledge. This is incorrect because it constitutes providing financial advice or making loan underwriting decisions, which is outside the scope of a real estate license, and could lead to misrepresentation if the buyer is later deemed ineligible by a lender. This violates the principle of acting within one's competency and could be construed as practicing mortgage brokering without a license. Another incorrect approach is to recommend one government-backed loan program over another without a thorough understanding of the buyer's complete financial picture and the specific nuances of each program. This is incorrect because it can lead to a buyer pursuing a loan that is not the most suitable for their situation, potentially causing them to miss out on better terms or face unexpected challenges. It also implies a level of expertise in mortgage lending that the licensee likely does not possess, violating ethical obligations to provide accurate and unbiased information. A further incorrect approach is to dismiss government-backed loans as being too complex or not worth pursuing for a particular buyer without fully exploring the benefits they might offer. This is incorrect because it can unfairly limit a buyer's options and prevent them from accessing potentially advantageous financing that could make homeownership achievable. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to act in the best interest of the client by not presenting all viable avenues. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework of accurate information dissemination and referral. When discussing financing, licensees should focus on educating clients about the existence and general purpose of various loan types, including government-backed options. The critical step is to then refer the client to a qualified mortgage professional for detailed advice, pre-approval, and application assistance. This ensures clients receive expert guidance, while the licensee remains within their legal and ethical boundaries. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that a real estate licensee in Louisiana is tasked with marketing a property that is currently vacant, but has historically been used for small-scale crop cultivation and livestock grazing. The property is located in an area with mixed zoning, including agricultural, residential, and some light commercial. The licensee needs to determine the most appropriate classification for marketing purposes to attract the right buyers and comply with Louisiana's real estate regulations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional practice and regulatory compliance in Louisiana? Option A. Market the property primarily as agricultural land, emphasizing its suitability for farming and ranching, while also noting its potential for future development based on surrounding zoning. Option B. Market the property as a commercial venture, focusing on its potential for retail or service businesses due to the presence of some commercial zoning nearby. Option C. Market the property exclusively as a residential development opportunity, assuming its proximity to residential zones makes it ideal for housing. Option D. Market the property broadly as undeveloped land, allowing potential buyers to explore various uses without specific guidance. The correct answer is A. Market the property primarily as agricultural land, emphasizing its suitability for farming and ranching, while also noting its potential for future development based on surrounding zoning. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a need for a real estate licensee in Louisiana to accurately identify and market different property types. This scenario is professionally challenging because a misunderstanding of property classifications can lead to misrepresentation, wasted marketing efforts, and potential legal repercussions for the licensee and their client. Careful judgment is required to ensure that marketing strategies align with the specific characteristics and legal definitions of each property type within Louisiana's real estate framework. The best approach involves a thorough understanding of Louisiana's real estate classifications and tailoring marketing efforts accordingly. This means recognizing that residential properties are primarily for dwelling, commercial properties are for business operations, industrial properties are for manufacturing or production, and agricultural properties are for farming or ranching. A licensee must be able to articulate these distinctions to clients and prospective buyers, ensuring that marketing materials accurately reflect the property's intended use and zoning. This aligns with the Louisiana Real Estate Commission's (LREC) mandate for licensees to act with honesty and integrity, avoiding misrepresentation in all dealings. An incorrect approach is to broadly market all properties under a single, generic real estate umbrella without considering their specific classifications. This fails to acknowledge the distinct legal, zoning, and market considerations for each property type. For instance, marketing an industrial warehouse as a commercial space without verifying its industrial zoning and suitability for manufacturing could lead to a buyer purchasing a property that cannot be legally used for their intended purpose, violating LREC requirement for licensees to be knowledgeable about property types and their associated regulations. Another incorrect approach is to assume that a property's current use dictates its classification for all purposes. While current use is a factor, zoning regulations and the property's inherent characteristics are paramount in determining its legal classification. For example, a large tract of land currently used for occasional weekend gatherings might be legally classified as agricultural or undeveloped land, not residential. Marketing it solely as a residential development opportunity without confirming zoning and subdivision regulations would be a misrepresentation. This disregards the LREC emphasis on accurate property descriptions and adherence to local ordinances. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the aesthetic appeal of a property without considering its functional classification. A property might have a beautiful facade, but if it's zoned for industrial use, marketing it primarily as a high-end residential dwelling would be misleading. This ignores the fundamental differences in infrastructure, access, and regulatory requirements that define each property type in Louisiana. The professional reasoning process should involve 1. Confirming the property's legal classification through title searches, zoning verification, and understanding local ordinances. 2. Educating the client on the implications of the property's classification for marketing and sale. 3. Developing marketing strategies that specifically target the appropriate buyer pool for that property type, using accurate terminology and highlighting relevant features. 4. Ensuring all representations made to potential buyers are truthful and align with the property's verified classification and zoning. Question 13. Regulatory review indicates that a Louisiana real estate salesperson has received an earnest money deposit check from a buyer. Considering the Louisiana Real Estate Commission's guidelines on financial management, which of the following actions best upholds the salesperson's professional and legal obligations? Option A. Inform the buyer that the salesperson will handle the deposit personally and provide a receipt for the funds. Option B. Hold the earnest money check in the salesperson's personal briefcase until the closing date to ensure it is not misplaced. Option C. Deposit the earnest money check directly into the employing broker's business operating account for safekeeping. Option D. Immediately deposit the earnest money check into the employing broker's designated trust account and maintain a detailed record of the transaction. The correct answer is D. Immediately deposit the earnest money check into the employing broker's designated trust account and maintain a detailed record of the transaction. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Louisiana to balance the immediate needs of a client with their ongoing legal and ethical obligations regarding financial record keeping. The pressure to close a deal quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of financial documentation, which is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance and client trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all financial transactions are handled transparently and in accordance with Louisiana Real Estate Commission (LREC) regulations. The best professional practice involves meticulously documenting all earnest money deposits, including the date received, the source of funds, the amount, and the disposition of the funds, and promptly depositing these funds into the designated trust account. This approach ensures full compliance with Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 37, Chapter 13, Real Estate Brokers and Salespersons, specifically concerning the handling of client funds. Maintaining detailed and accurate records in the trust account provides an auditable trail, protects both the client and the salesperson from potential disputes, and upholds the integrity of the real estate transaction process as mandated by the LREC. An incorrect approach would be to hold the earnest money check temporarily in the salesperson's personal possession or office desk before depositing it. This action violates LREC rules that mandate the prompt deposit of all client funds into a properly maintained trust account. Such a delay creates a risk of commingling personal and client funds, even if unintentional, and can lead to accusations of misuse of funds, undermining client confidence and violating statutory requirements for trust account management. Another unacceptable approach is to deposit the earnest money directly into the employing broker's operating account instead of the designated trust account. This is a clear violation of trust account regulations, as it commingles client funds with business operating funds. Louisiana law strictly prohibits this practice, as it jeopardizes the security of client deposits and can lead to severe disciplinary action from the LREC, including license suspension or revocation. Finally, failing to create and maintain a detailed ledger or record of the earnest money transaction, even if the funds are eventually deposited correctly, is also professionally unsound. While the deposit itself is crucial, the absence of comprehensive record keeping means the salesperson cannot adequately demonstrate compliance with LREC reporting requirements or provide a clear audit trail if questioned. This lack of documentation can lead to difficulties in reconciling accounts and may be viewed as a failure to maintain proper business records, which is also subject to LREC oversight. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves understanding the specific requirements of the LREC regarding trust accounts and record keeping, establishing clear internal procedures for handling client funds, and consistently adhering to those procedures regardless of the urgency of a transaction. When in doubt, consulting with the employing broker or seeking clarification from the LREC is the most prudent course of action. Question 14. Consider a scenario where a prospective buyer in Louisiana is pre-approved for a mortgage, but expresses confusion about the differences between conventional, FHA, and VA loans, and asks for your recommendation on which loan type would be most beneficial for their specific financial situation. What is the most appropriate course of action for a licensed Louisiana real estate salesperson? Option A. Recommend an FHA loan, explaining that it typically has lower down payment requirements and may be suitable for buyers with less than perfect credit. Option B. Explain the general characteristics and common benefits of conventional, FHA, and VA loans, emphasizing that the best choice depends on the buyer's individual financial profile, and strongly advise the buyer to consult with a qualified mortgage lender for personalized guidance. Option C. Provide a detailed breakdown of the underwriting criteria and interest rate adjustment mechanisms for each loan type, including hypothetical scenarios. Option D. Advise the buyer to focus solely on finding the perfect property, assuring them that financing details can be sorted out later with the lender. The correct answer is B. Explain the general characteristics and common benefits of conventional, FHA, and VA loans, emphasizing that the best choice depends on the buyer's individual financial profile, and strongly advise the buyer to consult with a qualified mortgage lender for personalized guidance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate salesperson in Louisiana to navigate the complexities of financing options for a client while adhering strictly to Louisiana Real Estate Commission, LREC, regulations and ethical duties. The salesperson must ensure they are providing accurate, non-misleading information and acting in the client's best interest, without overstepping their licensing authority or engaging in the unauthorized practice of law or financial advising. The challenge lies in balancing helpfulness with regulatory compliance and professional boundaries. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the salesperson acting as a facilitator and educator, providing general information about common financing options, and encouraging the buyer to consult with qualified professionals. This aligns with LREC guidelines that permit licensees to discuss financing in general terms, but prohibit them from offering specific financial advice or acting as a mortgage broker without proper licensing. The salesperson should explain that different loan types have varying requirements and benefits, and that a mortgage lender can assess the buyer's specific financial situation to recommend the most suitable loan. This approach respects professional boundaries, complies with LREC regulations by not providing unlicensed advice, and empowers the buyer to make informed decisions with the help of experts. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to recommend a specific type of loan, such as a FHA loan, based on the salesperson's assumption about the buyer's financial situation. This is problematic because it constitutes providing financial advice, which is outside the scope of a real estate salesperson's license in Louisiana. It could lead to the buyer choosing a loan that is not in their best interest, potentially causing financial harm, and violates LREC rules against practicing law or offering unlicensed financial services. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the importance of financing and focus solely on the property's features. This fails to uphold the salesperson's duty to represent the client's best interests. Understanding financing is a critical component of a successful real estate transaction, and ignoring it can lead to a deal falling apart or the buyer entering into a purchase they cannot afford, which is ethically unsound and potentially detrimental to the client. A third incorrect approach is to provide detailed explanations of mortgage underwriting processes and interest rate calculations. While seemingly helpful, this ventures into the territory of financial advising and could be construed as providing services that require a mortgage loan originator license. It also risks providing inaccurate information, as the salesperson is not a licensed financial expert and could mislead the buyer. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize client welfare and regulatory compliance. When faced with questions outside their expertise or licensing scope, the decision-making process should involve identifying the client's need, assessing their own capabilities and licensing limitations, and then connecting the client with appropriate licensed professionals. In real estate financing, this means educating clients about the general availability of financing options and strongly recommending they consult with mortgage lenders and financial advisors. This ensures the client receives accurate, expert advice while the salesperson remains within legal and ethical boundaries. Question 15. Upon reviewing a potential buyer's financial profile and stated preferences for a home purchase in New Orleans, Louisiana, a real estate salesperson learns the buyer is primarily concerned with keeping their initial monthly housing costs as low as possible. The buyer expresses a desire for a mortgage that offers the lowest possible starting payment. What is the most ethically responsible and professionally sound approach for the salesperson to take regarding mortgage options? Option A. Recommend an adjustable rate mortgage, highlighting its typically lower initial interest rate and consequently lower initial monthly payment, without extensively detailing the risks of future payment increases. Option B. Explain the general characteristics and potential long-term implications of fixed rate, adjustable rate, and interest-only mortgages, emphasizing how each impacts payment stability and overall cost, and strongly recommend the buyer consult with a mortgage lender to determine the best fit for their financial situation. Option C. Suggest an interest-only mortgage, focusing on the benefit of a lower initial payment that does not include principal repayment, and omit discussion about the principal balance remaining unchanged and the need for future refinancing or higher payments. Option D. Advise the buyer that their primary concern for low initial payments makes a fixed-rate mortgage the only suitable option and discourage them from exploring other mortgage types. The correct answer is B. Explain the general characteristics and potential long-term implications of fixed-rate, adjustable rate, and interest-only mortgages, emphasizing how each impacts payment stability and overall cost, and strongly recommend the buyer consult with a mortgage lender to determine the best fit for their financial situation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a real estate salesperson must balance the client's stated preference with their fiduciary duty to ensure the client fully understands the implications and risks of different mortgage products. The salesperson must avoid steering the client towards a product that might not be in their best long-term financial interest, even if it seems simpler or more appealing initially. Louisiana law requires licensees to act with honesty, integrity, and in the best interest of their clients, which includes providing accurate and complete information about financial products relevant to a real estate transaction. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves thoroughly explaining the fundamental differences between fixed-rate, adjustable rate, and interest-only mortgages, focusing on how each impacts monthly payments, long-term costs, and risk. This includes detailing the potential for payment increases with adjustable rate mortgages and the principal repayment structure, or lack thereof, with interest-only loans. The salesperson should then encourage the client to consult with a qualified mortgage lender or financial advisor to determine which product best aligns with their financial situation, risk tolerance, and long-term goals. This approach upholds the fiduciary duty by prioritizing client education and informed decision-making, ensuring the client is not unduly influenced by the salesperson's potentially limited expertise in complex financial instruments. Louisiana Real Estate Commission, LREC. Regulations emphasize the importance of licensees acting ethically and competently, which extends to ensuring clients understand significant financial aspects of a transaction. Incorrect approach is analysis. Recommending a specific mortgage type without a comprehensive understanding of the client's financial capacity and future plans is an ethical failure. For instance, pushing an adjustable rate mortgage solely because it offers a lower initial payment, without fully explaining the risk of future payment increases, could lead to financial hardship for the client and violates the duty of care. Similarly, suggesting an interest-only mortgage without clearly articulating that the principal balance remains unchanged and that future payments will be higher, or that refinancing will be necessary, misrepresents the product's nature and potential long-term costs. Failing to advise the client to seek professional financial advice when discussing complex financial products like mortgages also falls short of the expected standard of care and could be construed as practicing without a license in financial advising, which is outside the scope of a real estate salesperson's authority. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize client education and informed consent when discussing financial products, especially those with significant long-term implications like mortgages. The salesperson's role is to provide general information and facilitate access to qualified professionals. The decision-making process should involve identifying the client's stated needs, assessing the salesperson's knowledge base, and recognizing when to refer the client to specialists, e.g., mortgage brokers, financial advisors, to ensure the client receives accurate and comprehensive advice tailored to their unique circumstances. This layered approach protects both the client and the licensee. Question 16. When evaluating a commercial property in New Orleans for a potential lease agreement, a Louisiana licensed real estate salesperson learns that the property is currently subject to an existing, unexpired lease agreement with another tenant. The salesperson's client is interested in leasing the property for their business. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the salesperson? Option A. Withhold information about the existing lease agreement from the potential lessee and their representative, hoping to finalize the new lease before the current tenant's lease becomes a point of contention. Option B. Immediately inform the potential lessee and their representative about the existing lease agreement, emphasizing that any new lease would be subject to the terms and conditions of the current lease and the possibility of its termination. Option C. Suggest that the potential lessee proceed with signing a new lease agreement, with a clause stating that the new lease is contingent upon the termination of the existing lease, without confirming the feasibility or process of such termination. Option D. Advise the potential lessee that the existing lease is likely not a significant issue and can probably be terminated without much difficulty, encouraging them to proceed with the new lease negotiations. The correct answer is B. Immediately inform the potential lessee and their representative about the existing lease agreement, emphasizing that any new lease would be subject to the terms and conditions of the current lease and the possibility of its termination. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate salesperson in Louisiana to navigate a potential conflict of interest and uphold their fiduciary duties to their client, while also considering the financial implications for a potential buyer. The salesperson must balance the need to secure a lease agreement for their client with the ethical obligation to disclose all material facts that could affect a buyer's decision. Careful judgment is required to ensure transparency and avoid misrepresentation. The best professional approach involves clearly and promptly disclosing the existence of the existing lease agreement to the potential buyer and their agent. This approach is correct because Louisiana law, specifically the Louisiana Real Estate License Law and its associated rules and regulations, mandates that licensees must disclose all material facts known to them that could affect the value or desirability of a property. An existing lease agreement is undeniably a material fact that significantly impacts a property's value and a buyer's potential use and income generation. By disclosing this information upfront, the salesperson acts with honesty and integrity, fulfilling their fiduciary duty to the potential buyer and avoiding any appearance of impropriety or deceptive practice. This proactive disclosure also allows the potential buyer to make an informed decision based on complete information. An incorrect approach would be to downplay the significance of the existing lease or to suggest that it can be easily terminated without confirming the terms and feasibility of such termination. This is professionally unacceptable because it constitutes a misrepresentation of material facts. The salesperson is not in a position to guarantee the termination of a lease without proper legal consultation and confirmation from the current tenant. Such an action violates the duty of honesty and fair dealing owed to all parties in a transaction, as well as the specific disclosure requirements under Louisiana's real estate regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to withhold the information about the existing lease agreement from the potential buyer and their agent, hoping that the sale or lease of the property will proceed without this knowledge becoming an issue. This is a serious ethical and regulatory failure. Louisiana law requires licensees to disclose all known material facts. Concealing such a significant detail is a direct violation of this duty and could lead to legal repercussions, disciplinary action by the Louisiana Real Estate Commission, and damage to the salesperson's reputation. It undermines the trust essential in real estate transactions. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to advise the potential buyer to proceed with the lease agreement without full disclosure, implying that the existing lease is a minor inconvenience that can be resolved later. This is professionally unacceptable, as it encourages a party to enter into a contract without complete knowledge of all material terms and conditions, potentially leading to disputes and legal complications. The salesperson's role is to facilitate informed decisions, not to steer clients towards agreements under false pretenses. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of fiduciary duties, including the duty of disclosure. When faced with information that could materially affect a transaction, the professional should err on the side of transparency. This means promptly and fully disclosing the information to all relevant parties. If there is any doubt about the materiality of a fact, it should be disclosed. Seeking clarification from the client or legal counsel is also a prudent step when complex situations arise. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all parties are making decisions based on accurate and complete information, thereby upholding ethical standards and complying with regulatory requirements. Question 17. The analysis reveals that a Louisiana real estate salesperson is assisting a buyer with a property purchase. The buyer is concerned about the mortgage application process and asks the salesperson for help in filling out the loan application and for advice on which loan products would be most suitable for their financial situation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the salesperson to take? Option A. Advise the buyer that the mortgage application is a formality and that they can provide the necessary financial documentation to the lender at a later stage to expedite the process. Option B. Pre-fill the mortgage application form with the information the buyer provides, ensuring accuracy in transcription, and then submit it to the lender on behalf of the buyer. Option C. Explain the general steps involved in a mortgage application. Advise the buyer to consult directly with a licensed mortgage loan originator or lender for specific guidance, and to complete the official application, and offer to connect them with reputable mortgage professionals. Option D. Offer specific recommendations on the best loan products and interest rates based on the salesperson's understanding of the buyer's financial situation and the current market. The correct answer is C. Explain the general steps involved in a mortgage application. Advise the buyer to consult directly with a licensed mortgage loan originator or lender for specific guidance, and to complete the official application, and offer to connect them with reputable mortgage professionals. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Louisiana real estate salesperson because it involves navigating the critical initial stages of the mortgage application process while adhering to strict Louisiana Real Estate Commission (LREC) regulations and ethical duties. The salesperson must balance assisting the client with understanding the process and gathering necessary information without overstepping into the role of a licensed mortgage loan originator or providing financial advice beyond their scope. Missteps can lead to violations of LREC rules, potential harm to the client, and damage to the salesperson's reputation and license. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance and client protection. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves the salesperson acting as a facilitator and educator within their license scope. This means clearly explaining the general steps of the mortgage application process, identifying the types of information typically required by lenders, and advising the client to consult directly with a licensed mortgage loan originator or lender for specific guidance, and to complete the official application. The salesperson should offer to connect the client with reputable mortgage professionals they trust, but emphasize that the client must initiate and complete the application with the lender. This approach aligns with LREC Rule 2907, which prohibits licensees from engaging in activities that require a mortgage loan originator license, unless they hold such a license. It also upholds the ethical duty to be competent and to avoid misrepresentation, ensuring the client receives accurate information about the process and is directed to the appropriate professionals for financial advice and loan origination. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the salesperson attempting to pre-fill parts of the mortgage application form for the client, even if they are only transcribing information the client provides. This action could be construed as engaging in the business of originating loans, which requires a separate mortgage loan originator license in Louisiana, violating LREC Rule 2907. Furthermore, if the salesperson makes any errors in transcribing or interpreting the information, they could be held liable for providing inaccurate information to the lender, potentially jeopardizing the loan approval and harming the client. Another incorrect approach is for the salesperson to offer specific advice on which loan products or interest rates the client should pursue, or to make recommendations based on their personal opinion of what would be best for the client's financial situation. This constitutes providing financial advice and engaging in loan origination activities for which the salesperson is not licensed. Louisiana law, including LREC regulations, strictly prohibits unlicensed individuals from offering such advice. This action also violates the ethical principle of acting within one's area of expertise and competence. A third incorrect approach is for the salesperson to downplay the importance of the mortgage application process, or to suggest that the client can delay providing certain financial documents to the lender. This could mislead the client about the lender's requirements and the seriousness of the application, potentially causing delays or denial of the loan. It also fails to uphold the salesperson's duty to act in the client's best interest by ensuring they understand and comply with the necessary steps for securing financing. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes client protection and regulatory compliance. First, they must clearly define the boundaries of their own license and expertise. Second, they should educate the client about the general process and identify the types of information needed, without providing specific financial advice or attempting to complete official application forms. Third, they must identify and recommend qualified, licensed professionals, e.g., mortgage loan originators, who can provide the necessary services. Fourth, they should facilitate introductions but ensure the client understands that the responsibility for the application and financial decisions rests with them and the licensed lender. This approach ensures that the client receives appropriate guidance and services from licensed professionals, while the salesperson operates within their legal and ethical boundaries. Question 18. The risk matrix shows a potential for a breach of contract due to a poorly drafted listing agreement for a property located in New Orleans, Louisiana. The agreement, prepared by the seller's attorney, appears to lack a specific termination date and is vague regarding the exact commission percentage, stating only a competitive market rate. The listing salesperson, M.S. Dubois, has concerns about the enforceability of this agreement under Louisiana law. Which of the following actions should M.S. Dubois take? Option A. Advise the seller that the listing agreement may be unenforceable due to the missing termination date and ambiguous commission terms, and recommend they consult with their attorney to amend the agreement to clearly define these essential elements as required by Louisiana contract law. Option B. Proceed with listing the property, assuming that the term competitive market rate will be easily understood, and that the absence of a termination date can be resolved through standard industry practice in Louisiana. Option C. Make a note on the listing agreement indicating her understanding of competitive market rate as 5% and add a termination date 6 months from the listing date, without consulting the seller or their attorney. Option D. Inform the seller that the agreement is invalid as written and refuse to list the property until a new agreement is drafted by MS. Dubois Brokerage. Correct answer is A. Advise the seller that the listing agreement may be unenforceable due to the missing termination date and ambiguous commission terms, and recommend they consult with their attorney to amend the agreement to clearly define these essential elements as required by Louisiana contract law. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a potential for a breach of contract due to a poorly drafted listing agreement, highlighting the importance of understanding the essential elements of a valid real estate contract in Louisiana. This scenario is professionally challenging because a licensed salesperson must navigate the complexities of contract law to protect both their client and their brokerage from legal repercussions, while also ensuring a smooth transaction. The salesperson's judgment is critical in identifying and rectifying potential contractual deficiencies before they lead to disputes. The best professional approach involves a thorough review of the listing agreement to identify any missing or ambiguous essential elements required for enforceability under Louisiana law. This includes ensuring there is a clear offer and acceptance, consideration, a legal purpose, and competent parties. Specifically, the salesperson should verify that the agreement clearly defines the property, the price, the commission terms, the duration of the agreement, and the authority granted to the agent. If any elements are unclear or absent, the salesperson must promptly communicate these issues to the seller and recommend seeking legal counsel from a Louisiana attorney to amend the contract to ensure its enforceability and compliance with Louisiana Civil Code provisions regarding obligations and contracts. This proactive measure safeguards against future disputes and upholds professional ethical standards by ensuring all parties understand their rights and obligations. An approach that involves proceeding with the transaction without addressing the identified ambiguities in the listing agreement is professionally unacceptable. This failure to ensure the contract's enforceability exposes the seller, the brokerage, and potentially the salesperson to litigation. It violates the duty of care owed to the client and disregards the legal requirements for valid contracts in Louisiana, potentially leading to a void or voidable agreement. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to assume the existing language is sufficient without a proper review. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to apply knowledge of Louisiana contract law. It risks overlooking critical omissions or ambiguities that could invalidate the agreement, leading to commission disputes or claims of misrepresentation. Finally, an approach that involves making unilateral changes to the listing agreement without the seller's explicit consent and without advising them to seek legal counsel is also professionally unacceptable. Such actions exceed the salesperson's authority, constitute unauthorized practice of law, and can lead to significant legal and ethical violations, potentially invalidating the contract and jeopardizing the salesperson's license. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes due diligence, adherence to legal requirements, and clear communication. This involves 1. Proactively identifying potential contractual issues by thoroughly reviewing all agreements against relevant state laws and regulations. 2. Consulting with legal counsel when uncertainties arise or when amendments are necessary. 3. Maintaining open and transparent communication with clients, clearly explaining any identified issues and recommended solutions. 4. Documenting all communications and actions taken. Question 19. Implementation of a real estate agent's fiduciary duties in Louisiana is paramount when representing a seller. If a Louisiana licensed real estate agent representing a seller in an exclusive right-to-sell listing agreement also has a buyer client interested in purchasing that same property, what is the most appropriate course of action to ethically and legally proceed? Option A. The agent should proceed with showing the property to the buyer without informing the seller about the buyer's interest, as the agent's primary duty is to the seller under the exclusive right-to-sell agreement. Option B. The agent must immediately disclose the potential dual agency situation to the seller in writing and obtain the seller's explicit written consent to represent both parties before showing the property to the buyer. Option C. The agent should refuse to show the property to their buyer client to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest, thereby prioritizing the seller's exclusive representation. Option D. The agent can verbally inform the seller of the potential dual agency situation, but can proceed with showing the property to the buyer without obtaining written consent, as the verbal notification is sufficient. Correct answer is B. The agent must immediately disclose the potential dual agency situation to the seller in writing and obtain the seller's explicit written consent to represent both parties before showing the property to the buyer. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate agent to navigate the delicate balance between client interests and regulatory obligations, specifically concerning disclosure and fiduciary duties under Louisiana law. The agent must act with loyalty, obedience, and full disclosure to their client, while also adhering to the Louisiana Real Estate Commission's (LREC) rules and regulations. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the agent's actions do not create a conflict of interest or violate the duty of disclosure owed to the seller. The best approach involves the agent proactively and transparently communicating the potential conflict to their seller client and obtaining explicit written consent before proceeding with any dual agency. This approach upholds the agent's fiduciary duty of loyalty and full disclosure by prioritizing the seller's informed decision-making. Louisiana law, particularly through the LREC regulations and the Louisiana Brokerage Agreement Act, mandates that agents disclose all material facts and potential conflicts of interest to their clients. Obtaining written consent for dual agency is a critical step in fulfilling these obligations and mitigating legal and ethical risks. An incorrect approach would be for the agent to proceed with showing the property to their buyer client without informing the seller of the potential dual agency situation. This failure to disclose a material fact and potential conflict of interest directly violates the agent's fiduciary duty of loyalty and full disclosure to the seller, as required by LREC regulations. It creates an undisclosed conflict of interest, potentially compromising the agent's ability to represent the seller's best interests objectively. Another incorrect approach would be for the agent to inform the seller verbally about the potential dual agency, but not obtain written consent. While verbal communication is a step towards disclosure, Louisiana law and LREC rules generally require written consent for dual agency. Relying solely on verbal consent leaves room for misinterpretation and disputes, and it does not provide the clear, documented evidence of informed consent that is professionally and legally required. This approach fails to meet the stringent documentation standards for dual agency representation. A final incorrect approach would be for the agent to advise the seller that they cannot show the property to their buyer client due to the potential conflict, effectively refusing to represent the buyer in this specific transaction. While this avoids dual agency, it may not be the most client-centric or legally mandated solution if the agent is capable of fulfilling their duties under a properly disclosed and consented to dual agency arrangement. The professional decision-making process should involve first exploring the possibility of informed consent for dual agency, as this allows the agent to potentially serve both parties ethically and legally, rather than immediately shutting down a potential transaction. Question 20. To address the challenge of accurately calculating loan-to-value (LTV) ratios in private mortgage insurance (PMI) premiums for a conventional mortgage in Louisiana, a salesperson is presented with the following scenario. A property has a purchase price of $300,000, an appraised value of $295,000, and the borrower is seeking a loan of $265,000 with a strong credit score. Assuming a standard PMI premium rate of 0.75% of the loan amount for a borrower with this credit profile and LTV, what is the correct annual PMI cost? Option A, $1,965,000. Option B, $2,062.50. Option C, $1,987.50. Option D, $2,212.50. The correct answer is C, $1,987.50. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a salesperson to interpret and apply Louisiana's specific lending regulations concerning loan-to-value (LTV) ratios and the calculation of private mortgage insurance (PMI) premiums. Misinterpreting these regulations can lead to inaccurate loan approvals, potential financial harm to the borrower, and regulatory noncompliance for the salesperson and their brokerage. Careful judgment is required to ensure adherence to the Louisiana Residential Mortgage Lending Act and related administrative rules. The best approach involves accurately calculating the LTV ratio based on the appraised value and then determining the PMI premium as a percentage of the loan amount, as stipulated by Louisiana regulations for conventional loans, with less than 20% down payment. This method directly applies the statutory requirements for LTV and PMI calculation, ensuring compliance and providing the borrower with a transparent and accurate understanding of their loan costs. The Louisiana Residential Mortgage Lending Act, RS 6, 1001 et seq., and its associated administrative rules govern these calculations. Specifically, the LTV is determined by dividing the loan amount by the lesser of the property's appraised value or its purchase price. For PMI, Louisiana regulations often align with federal guidelines, like the Homeowners Protection Act of 1998, which Louisiana generally follows for PMI cancellation provisions. But the initial premium calculation is directly tied to the LTV and loan amount. A common calculation for the annual PMI premium is 0.5% to 1.5% of the loan amount, depending on the borrower's credit score and the LTV. In this case, using the lower end of the typical range for a strong borrower is a reasonable assumption for calculation purposes, an approach that incorrectly uses the purchase price instead of the appraised value, or the lesser of the two. For the LTV calculation would violate the principle of using the most conservative valuation for determining risk, which is a cornerstone of lending regulations. This could lead to an artificially lower LTV, potentially masking higher risk and misrepresenting the loan terms to the borrower. Furthermore, calculating the PMI premium based on a percentage of the down payment, rather than the loan amount, is a fundamental misapplication of the standard PMI calculation methodology and directly contravenes regulatory guidance. This would result in an incorrect and likely lower PMI premium, misleading the borrower about their actual monthly housing expenses. Another incorrect approach might be to simply estimate the PMI without performing the required calculations based on the LTV and loan amount. This lacks the precision and transparency mandated by Louisiana's lending laws and ethical standards, as it fails to provide a verifiable basis for the cost. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with identifying the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the transaction in Louisiana. This involves consulting the Louisiana Residential Mortgage Lending Act and any relevant administrative rules or interpretations. Next, they should gather all necessary data, including the purchase price, appraised value, and loan amount. Then, they must perform the calculations precisely as dictated by the regulations, ensuring that the LTV is correctly determined and the PMI premium is calculated based on the loan amount and the established percentage range. Finally, they should clearly communicate these calculations and their implications to the borrower, ensuring full transparency and compliance.